ladies and gentlemen. We are coming on the air right now because we are tracking a breaking story out of Europe, and I have to tell you, in all my years of covering international news, this one stopped me cold. What I am about to walk you through is not just another headline about sanctions or diplomatic statements. This is the moment the entire Western strategy against Vladimir Putin fundamentally changed. And it happened in the last 48 hours. So settle in, turn up the volume, because this is a big one, and you are going to want to hear every word of it. Here is what just went down. The European Union, the same bloc that critics said was too weak, too divided, too hopelessly dependent on Russian energy to ever truly challenge Moscow, that European Union just reached into Vladimir Putin's war chest and took 210 billion euros. They did not freeze it. They seized it permanently. That money belongs to Ukraine now. It will never go back to Russia, ever. And I need you to understand something crucial here. This was not a sanction. Sanctions can be lifted. Frozen assets can be unfrozen when political winds change direction. This is fundamentally different. This is Europe telling Vladimir Putin that his national wealth, the savings of the Russian people, is now going to rebuild the very country he tried to destroy. That is a message that cannot be walked back. That is a line that cannot be uncrossed. And the implications are absolutely staggering. But here's where this story takes an even sharper turn, and this is the part you really need to hear. The man who lit the fuse on this economic bomb was NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and what he said from Berlin this week has not been heard on European soil since the dark final days of World War II. Rutte stood before the cameras and told 500 million Europeans to prepare for war on the scale their grandparents endured. Those were his exact words. The scale of conflict experienced by our grandparents and great-grandparents. He invoked the deadliest war in human history. And he was not speaking metaphorically. He was not using dramatic language for effect. He meant it literally. Rutte went further and got very specific. He said Putin's regime is prepared to use military force against NATO within 5 years. 5 years. That is not some distant, hypothetical scenario that diplomats discuss over coffee at academic conferences. That is a concrete timeline that demands immediate and decisive action. And then Rutte said something that reveals just how completely the Western mindset has shifted. He said he stopped trying to guess what is in Putin's mind a long time ago. He only looks at the facts now. Do you understand the full weight of what that means? For 3 years, European leaders have been asking themselves whether they could negotiate with Putin, whether there was some magic formula that would satisfy him, whether they should try to see things from his perspective and find common ground. That conversation is officially over, dead, finished. Europe is done asking what Putin wants. They are now focused entirely on what Putin can do and how to stop him before he does it. And here's the proof that this is not just tough talk and empty rhetoric. Germany, the country that built its entire post-war national identity around pacifism and restraint, is now conducting active military war exercises. Dozens of German army helicopters flew low-altitude combat drills toward the Fritzlar Air Base this week in a dramatic display of readiness. German Armed Forces Inspector General Carsten Breuer publicly confirmed what military planners have been saying privately for months. 2029 is the critical year when Russia could achieve full offensive capability against NATO forces. Germany is preparing for that scenario right now, today. They are abandoning 7 decades of pacifist foreign policy because they have concluded that Vladimir Putin simply cannot be trusted under any circumstances. Not his words, not his promises, not his diplomatic guarantees. Berlin, Paris, and London have all reached the same conclusion independently. You do not negotiate with this man, you prepare for him. Now, I want you to think about this from Moscow's perspective for a moment, because the Kremlin's chaotic response tells you everything about how badly this landed and how unprepared they were. Within hours of the European announcement, Putin appeared on camera ordering the continuation of combat operations. His military chief, Gerasimov, announced expanded offensives in Kharkiv and Sumy regions. Defiance, right? Classic Putin strongman posturing. Except here is the glaring problem. At the exact same time Putin was ordering more military attacks, his foreign minister Lavrov was telling reporters that Russia poses absolutely no threat to Europe and is ready to provide legally binding security guarantees. Both of those contradictory things cannot possibly be true simultaneously. And European leaders have clearly decided which message they believe. They believe the missiles and the tanks rolling across Ukrainian territory, not the diplomatic press conferences. This is the fundamental shift happening right now in real time. Europe has stopped listening to what Moscow says and started watching carefully what Moscow actually does. And what Moscow does is wage brutal war. So Europe has responded with the most devastating non-military weapon in its entire arsenal. They are systematically draining Putin's bank account. They are funding his enemy with his own stolen money. And they are cutting off his energy revenue streams permanently. Now, if you are just joining us, stay right here, because what I am about to tell you might be the single most consequential part of this entire extraordinary story. For years and years, Vladimir Putin believed he had Europe completely trapped in an energy dependency. He thought the continent was so hopelessly reliant on Russian natural gas that they would never seriously challenge Moscow's authority. He weaponized that dependency for decades. He used it skillfully to divide European leaders against each other. He used it to soften their response to his repeated acts of aggression. He made entire national governments shape their foreign policies around keeping Moscow happy and the gas flowing. That leverage just evaporated completely overnight. EU member states have approved a complete and permanent phase-out of all Russian natural gas imports. The timeline is fixed and absolutely non-negotiable. Liquefied natural gas imports end by December 2026. Pipeline gas gets cut off entirely by September 2027. There is no negotiation possible. There is no exception being considered. Europe is severing its dependence on Russian energy forever and never looking back. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he was betting confidently that Europe would eventually cave and come crawling back because they desperately needed his gas. Instead, they found alternative suppliers. They built entirely new infrastructure at remarkable speed. They reduced their consumption dramatically through conservation and efficiency. And now they are locking the door permanently behind them and throwing away the key. Rutte summarized the new strategic reality in one devastating sentence that echoes across the continent. Without China's support, Russia cannot sustain this war. Think carefully about what that means for Russian ambitions. The great independent Russia, the superpower that was supposed to challenge American hegemony and reshape the global order, now depends entirely on the economic and political mercy of Beijing. Putin spent 20 years talking grandly about building a multipolar world free from Western dominance. Instead, he built a humiliating dependency on a single foreign power. Russia is rapidly transforming from a major independent power into merely a resource supplier for China. That is not a partnership of equals. That is a subordinate vassal relationship. And it happened because Putin catastrophically miscalculated everything about this war. Meanwhile, Ukraine is getting stronger and more resilient every single day this conflict continues. The EU Council just approved another 2.3 billion euros in aid as part of a massive fund that will deliver 50 billion euros by 2027. Europe is not just funding Ukraine's immediate war effort anymore. They are funding its complete reconstruction. They are fast-tracking its formal accession to the European Union by January 2027. Putin's invasion was supposed to keep Ukraine isolated from Western institutions forever. Instead, it accelerated Ukraine's full integration by decades. And here's something critically important that has gotten almost no media attention, but matters enormously for the bigger picture. Even the United States is quietly but decisively shifting its negotiating position. The latest revised version of the American peace plan for Ukraine removed several key provisions that would have directly benefited Russia. The clause recognizing Russian control over disputed parts of the Donbass region has been completely removed. The clause that would have prohibited Ukraine from ever joining NATO has also been eliminated entirely. Washington is not using public rhetoric as aggressive as Europe's fiery statements, but at the actual negotiating table where it counts, American diplomats are systematically crushing Russia's demands, one by one. The new plan even allows Ukraine to expand its standing military to 800,000 troops during peacetime. Putin's war was explicitly designed to weaken and diminish Ukraine permanently. Instead, Ukraine will emerge from this conflict larger, stronger, and more militarily capable than anyone imagined possible. If you are finding this breakdown valuable tonight, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support really helps us continue bringing you this kind of thorough, in-depth analysis on the stories that truly matter. So here is exactly where we stand tonight as this historic story continues unfolding. Vladimir Putin's grand geopolitical gamble against the entire West has turned into a comprehensive strategic catastrophe of his own making. He is losing on the battlefield. He is losing at the negotiating table. He is losing the economic war on every front. His European energy market is gone forever. His frozen assets are now funding his enemy. And ordinary Russian people are watching helplessly as their national wealth flows directly into Ukrainian coffers because of a disastrous war their leader started and cannot finish. Putin keeps appearing on state television, insisting everything is going according to plan. But what kind of plan ends with your country completely isolated, your economy systematically crippled, and your enemy emerging stronger than before you attacked them? That is not a strategic plan. That is a national disaster unfolding in slow motion. And the walls are closing in tighter every single day. That is all for tonight. I will see you right back here tomorrow.